Creationists believe if one of the planets were eliminated from our solar system, then the entire arrangement would collapse. Scientific fact: Newton's laws of universal gravitation disagree that a missing planet would collapse our solar system. Creationist belief number 2. The regular, predictable cycles of Earth, such as day and night and the 4 seasons, reveal supernatural design. Scientific fact: day and night cycle because of Earth's rotation, which is continually slowing down due to the tidal drag of the oceans against the continents. Billions of years ago, a day was less than 13 hours in duration. They don't clap my motherfucking ass. It's cool. The seasons cycle because of the tilt of the Earth's axis. The current tilt of 23.5 degrees is temporary and variable and will shift our planet into a new ice age within a few millennia. The seasons, as we know them today, will be unrecognizable as during the last ice age, which ended 11,500 years ago. Surprisingly, even the Earth's magnetic field is shifting and changeable. Seafloor spreading at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean has locked into volcanic rock a history of Earth's ever-changing magnetic field. The underwater geologic record reveals that only a few thousand years ago, your compass would have pointed south. Our planet's magnetic field, like all of Earth's other properties, has undergone continuous and radical change during the past 4.5 billion years. What seems during a human lifetime to be immutable and eternal soon disappears or changes into something vastly different on the geological timescale. The regularity of nature, cited by creationists, is usually a false premise based upon short-term, short-sighted data. Creationist belief: scientists' theories about how our solar system formed are blind speculation and completely untestable. The scientific fact is that using the Hubble Space Telescope and Earth-based observatories, scientists now have photographic evidence documenting each stage in the formation of a solar system. Number 1, photographs of gas and dust nebulae. 2, photographs of nebulae condensing into hydrogen-burning stars. 3, photographs of stars surrounded by their own orbiting planetary systems like our own. And 4, photographs of supernovae explosions, which destroy solar systems and provide raw material for the formation of new systems. Modern telescopes allow us to actually witness the births and deaths of other solar systems in our region of the Milky Way. Science, moreover, has a very clear understanding of how these solar systems naturally develop. Why then should we arrogantly presume that our own solar system arose in a radically different and miraculous way? Because in past decades, I have written critically on the subject of creationism. I have received considerable feedback over the years from the Christian community. One of the most common rebuttals they pose is a famous quotation from Albert Einstein: "God does not play dice with the universe." Creationists interpret this quotation to mean, 1, that Einstein believed in the biblical God, and that 2, Einstein believed that the universe was orderly, and 3, Einstein believed that God was responsible for this order. Einstein penned his oft-repeated phrase about God in a 1926 letter to Max Born, who, along with Danish physicist Niels Bohr, fathered the study of quantum mechanics. Bohr had claimed that the behavior of subatomic particles was often chaotic and unpredictable. Bohr argued that our everyday notions of structure, order, and cause-effect do not apply at the atomic level. Einstein refused to accept such a whimsical view of nature, claiming instead that, quote, "God does not play dice with the universe," end quote. The Bohr-Einstein debate raged for over a decade. Ultimately, Bohr and Born emerged victorious in this dispute, their evidence prevailing. Einstein was admittedly wrong. So, on the atomic level at least, God does indeed play with dice, play with the universe. Subatomic particles do, in fact, behave at times in random, unpredictable ways. thwarting completely our common sense expectations and even those of Albert Einstein. The question of whether Einstein believed in God depends on your definition of God. If you define God, as the creationists do, as a supernatural being who created the universe, who hears your prayers and who decides whether you go to heaven or hell, then the answer is no. By the traditional definition of God, Einstein was an atheist. Einstein himself said, quote, "It was, of course, a lie which you read about my religious convictions, a lie which is being systematically repeated. I do not believe in a personal God, and I have never denied this, but have expressed it clearly. If something is in me which can be called religious, that it is the unbounded admiration for the structure of the world, so far as our science can reveal it." Regarding life after death, Einstein said, quote, "I can imagine a God who rewards and punishes the objects of his creation, whose purposes are modeled after our own. A God, in short, who is but a reflection of human frailty. Neither can I believe that the individual survives the death of his body, although feeble souls harbor such thoughts, through fear or ridiculous egotism." Einstein's statement that God does not play dice with the universe was a reference to the philosophy of pantheism. Rather than proposing a miracle-working personal deity, pantheism accepts the supremacy of the laws of physics. Thus interpreted, Einstein's statement would read, "The laws of physics do not permit nature to behave randomly or chaotically." As we noted, however, even this translated non-mystical expression of Einstein's statement turns out to be false, as Niels Bohr and Max Born demonstrated. Another famous scientist frequently cited by creationists is Stephen Hawking, often called the greatest scientific genius since Einstein. In 1988, Hawking published a fascinating book, A Brief History of Time. This outstanding bestseller explains the current popular theories describing the Big Bang origin of our universe. Quite open-mindedly, Hawking also analyzes the creationist claim that supernatural powers are necessary to explain the existence of the universe. Hawking concludes that no such powers are required, and that our universe was and is entirely natural, rather than supernatural, in origin and operation. Inexplicably, however, creationists, and to an even greater extent the news media, have portrayed Hawking's book as endorsing creationism because he uses the word God throughout the text when critiquing creationist arguments. Never mind that the entire thesis of Hawking's book flatly rejects creationism. Never mind that Hawking is openly atheistic by any standard definition of the word. Never mind that Hawking divorced his wife, Jane, in part because she became a creationist. Hawking uses the word God in his book, so he must be a creationist too, you say. The ABC News magazine 2020 ran an overhyped, ratings-boosting special proclaiming that a newly published book, i.e. Hawking's book, provided a scientific basis for religious faith. Television and radio evangelists often cite Hawking as proving that God created the universe. This vulgar misinterpretation, often deliberate, of A Brief History of Time reflects a very sad, profoundly disturbing aspect of American society. Science literacy is so ubiquitous and religious dogma so firmly ingrained that legions cannot read a well-written science book without hallucinating the supernatural on every page. Two facts provide overwhelming evidence that our solar system formed entirely through natural means. If you forget everything else we've discussed in this chapter, remember the following two facts. Number one, all planets in our solar system travel the same direction around the sun. And two, all planets travel on the same orbital plane, which also corresponds to the plane of the sun's equator. Why do I find these obscure facts so convincing? Because these are the facts that we would expect to observe if the solar system formed naturally. Recalling our previous analogy of water being sucked down an open drain, all the water within this flow naturally spins in the same direction as it is drawn toward the center. None of the water revolves in an opposing direction. Likewise, all newly forming planets, as they are drawn in the central hub's massive gravitational field, naturally begin orbiting in the same direction. The fact that all planets orbit in the same direction on the same plane and over the sun's equatorial plane is powerful, convincing evidence of the planet's natural formation. By contrast, a miracle-working creator could have kick-started the planets in numerous directions in orbital inclinations around the sun. Some planets could have been assigned west to east orbits, while others received opposing east to west assignments from the creator. Still, other planets could have been assigned polar orbits, traveling around the sun from north to south and back again. The creator could have also established orbits with a middle-of-the-road 45-degree inclination, or any combination in between. An almost unlimited array of orbital trajectories was available to the creator. Why, then, was the creator so strikingly uncreative in his choice of planetary orbits? Why did the creator so camouflage his miraculous orbital designs as to precisely mimic naturally occurring ones? Without appealing to the supernatural, let us suppose momentarily that the laws of physics by themselves are sufficient to explain the formation and operation of our solar system and the universe. Question. Even though the universe, let us assume, behaves entirely naturally rather than miraculously, couldn't the creator be using the physical laws he invented to govern the universe? On the surface, this question appears to be quite reasonable, suggesting a possible reconciliation between science and creationism. Yet, the very posing of the question itself is a concession of absolute defeat for creationism. Why? Because if one concedes that the universe shows no evidence of the miraculous, then one has conceded that no evidence supports creationism. Let us recall that the entire thrust of the creationist argument is that the universe reveals evidence of the supernatural. If that evidence is conceded to be absent, then creationism is left with no argument at all. If the laws of physics alone do the job and perform all the work within our universe, then a miracle worker is left with nothing to do. Occam's razor thus demands that this idle power be eliminated from our scientific explanations. Returning for a final visit to ancient Greece, suppose that the citizens finally concede that no Greek gods are perpetuating the arrow's motion and that no gods are transporting the hunter to the bottom of the cliff. The citizens concede, in other words, that physical laws fully explain nature's behavior. Suppose, however, that the citizens, instead of proposing direct miraculous intervention by their gods, now insist that their gods are simply using the laws of nature. The Greek gods are using inertia to keep the arrow moving and using gravity to bring the hunter to the ground. After conceding that physical laws sufficiently explain nature's behavior, we may wonder why the citizens continue to insist so dogmatically that the Greek gods exist at all. What evidence is left to substantiate the gods' existence? None. We may wonder whether psychological or emotional attachment to the gods may be clouding the citizens' scientific judgment. Likewise, modern creationism, in the end, has little to do with science and everything to do with human psychology and fifis. He said emotion, but fifis, same fucking thing. Chapter 5, The Miracle of Life on Earth. Creationists believe devoutly that the presence of life on Earth and the beauty and complexity of that life are incontrovertible evidence of conscious, purposeful design by the Creator. Regarding the scientific theory of evolution, creationists hold two contradictory and tormented views. Creationist view number 1. Evolution is a total myth. Animals may adapt slightly to their environments, but never evolve beyond their kind. Millions of fossils that supposedly document large-scale evolutionary progress are either fakes or have been fraudulently misrepresented by science. There is a mass conspiracy among scientists, inspired originally by the devil, to cover up the truth of creation by spreading the lie of evolution. And creationist view number 2. Major evolutionary progress may have occurred in many species, but there's no necessary conflict between the Bible and the theory of evolution. Let's thoughtfully and open-mindedly examine both creationist views of evolution. First, we'll ask, is evolution a myth? Later, in Chapter 6, we'll debate the question, can Genesis be reconciled with modern science? So, first question, is evolution a myth? My father often plays the state lottery, hoping against all odds to match 6 numbers out of 40 to become an instant millionaire. You won't be surprised to learn that he's never hit the jackpot. He's never even come close. About half the time, Dad matches only about one of the six winning numbers. Occasionally, he'll match two, and just once he matched three. Many weeks, however, Dad matches no numbers at all. Personal experience tells us that lotteries are practically impossible to win because the odds are stacked against us, millions to one. The reason why the winning jackpot is so elusive is that you must simultaneously match all the numbers. You can't play carryover from one lottery card to another or from one week's contest to the next. Dad once joked that if he could only accumulate 6 winning numbers, then he'd be a jackpot winner for sure. But let's suppose that Dad's carryover wish came true. This week, let's say he matches one number. Next week, he matches another for a total of 2. A month later, he matches 2 numbers on the same card for a running total of 4. Within a few months at most, Dad would accumulate 6 winning numbers and collect the jackpot. And so would everyone else. Creationists have thoroughly and effectively portrayed the theory of evolution as a lottery of life, a random biological lottery in which blind chance and mindless circumstance allegedly produce highly developed organisms. We know in a lottery that the odds are against us. We know that it's almost impossible to win. So creationists want us to believe that the odds are similarly stacked against evolution, millions to one. To believe in evolution is to believe the impossible, according to creationist doctrine. Creationists often cite the human eye as evidence of God's design. We are told, quite accurately, that the human eye is more complex and advanced than the most modern digital camera. Rhetorically, we are asked, if the camera requires a designer, then how could the human eye, which is far more sophisticated, arise by random accident? The answer is that the human eye did not arise by random accident, nor did any evolutionary biologist ever make such a claim. Creationism thrives by setting up and knocking down evolutionary strawmen, i.e., self-evidently ridiculous assertions about evolution that no scientist proposed in the first place. It's easy to topple an argument erected specifically for demolition. Producing an eye by random accident is even less likely than winning the lottery jackpot. But is this an accurate analogy? Does evolution more closely resemble a simultaneous matching of lottery numbers or an accumulation of them over an extended period as Dad wished to do? Evolution, by definition, is a gradual accumulation of functional adaptations. Evolution has only 3 essentials for success. 1, time. 2, genetic variety among offspring. And 3, a mechanism for preserving only beneficial variation. Such a mechanism is called natural or cumulative selection, which was first proposed by Charles Darwin in 1859. First, let's repair a creationist misunderstanding of the phrase theory of evolution. Creationists would have you believe that evolution is called a theory because scientists are unsure whether it's a fact. Such a misunderstanding of the term theory reflects creationism's total estrangement from the scientific community. Scientists use the term theory to mean explanation. We have cell theory, which explains the structure and function of living cells. Yet no scientist doubts that cells exist. We have atomic theory, which explains the behavior of atoms. Yet no scientist doubts that atoms exist. We have gravitational theory, which explains how celestial objects are attracted to each other. Yet no scientist doubts that gravitation is real. Evolutionary theory, therefore, explains evolution, its subtleties and processes. As we shall see, science considers evolution as undeniable as cells or atoms or gravitation, and the evidence for evolution is just as solid. What then is the evidence for evolution? And what do creationists have to say about it? Well, many people think of evolution as something that may have occurred millions of years ago. Evolution brings to mind a dusty museum filled with rickety old bones of animals long since extinct. Yet, the theory of evolution need not look to the distant past for confirmation. We may observe its mechanisms operating today, literally evolving new plant and animal characteristics before our eyes. Farmers, for example, fight a never ending battle against the rapid evolution of insects, which feed off of their crops. To combat the insect infestation, farmers routinely apply insecticides to their fields. Most of the insects are killed by this insecticide and so never produce another generation of offspring. But because of wide genetic variation among insects, a few withstand the insecticide and live to produce further offspring. These offspring will thus inherit their parents' tolerance of insecticide. If the farmer then reapplies the same insecticide to his crops, more insects will survive the second application than survive the first. In turn, this growing number of survivors will produce an even larger generation of offspring, which likewise will inherit a toleration of the farmer's insecticide. Soon, the insecticide does little or nothing to protect the farmer's crops. He must switch to a different poison because insect evolution has rendered his insecticide useless. When isolated from creationist propaganda and distortion, the theory of evolution by natural selection is easy to understand and easy to accept. In many ways, evolutionary theory is a case of stating the obvious. Moreover, it is not hypothetical speculation that insects evolve rapidly. It is a fact. In the real world, farmers do regularly change their insecticides for just this reason. Companies marketing insecticides must often reformulate their products to keep pace with insect evolution. Although insect evolution is bad news for farmers, let's consider for a moment the insect's point of view. Suppose that you are among the 10th generation of grasshoppers to live in a farmer's field. You have inherited an almost total immunity to the farmer's brand of poison. Knowing nothing of your species' recent evolution, nor of the near extermination of your forefathers, you marvel that the complex chemistry of your body is perfectly suited to resist insecticide. You pondered the unlikelihood that, quote, random accident designed your chemistry so precisely and efficaciously. You conclude that the only reasonable explanation for your highly developed state is the existence of a supernatural creator. You scoff at or even despise your fellow grasshoppers that propose evolutionary theories explaining your immunity to insecticide. You consider the evolutionists to be immoral, lacking any basis for a system of ethics or grasshopper family values. You may even quote scripture, "The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God." When we, like the grasshopper, suffer gaps in our understanding of events, we summon our God of the gaps to fill the void. The fast pace of modern evolution is often frightening. Many of our most powerful antibiotic weapons against diseases are now wholly ineffective against evolving microorganisms. Whenever you read on a medicine bottle to, quote, finish taking all of this prescription, you are being warned against the very real danger of bacterial evolution. If you stop taking your antibiotic before all the bacteria are killed, then you permit the reproduction of the remaining most resistant organisms. When these most resistant organisms start to multiply, you may become sicker than ever. Because of bacterial evolution, doctors sometimes encounter infections that actually thrive on the antibiotics designed to kill them. Treatments in these cases consists of simply withdrawing the antibiotic. We tend to view bacterial evolution as irrelevant and divorced from the debate between creationism and evolution. Yet, even today, the vast majority of life on Earth is too small to be seen without a microscope. Bacteria were the dominant life form on Earth for 3 billion years, and, like it or not, many of your direct ancestors were simply colonies of bacteria. Let's look at one more quick example of modern evolution at work. In the early 1800s, light-colored lichens covered many of the trees in the English countryside. The peppered moth was a light-colored insect that blended in unnoticeably with the lichens. Predators had great difficulty distinguishing the peppered moth from its background environment, so the moths easily survived and reproduced. Then the Industrial Revolution came to the English countryside. Coal-burning factories turned the lichens a sooty black. The light-colored peppered moth became clearly visible. Most of them were eaten. But because of genetic variation and mutation, a few peppered moths displayed a slightly darker color. These darker moths were better able to blend in with the sooty lichens, and so lived to produce other darker colored moths. In little over 100 years, successive generations of peppered moths evolved from almost completely white to completely black. Natural selection, rather than random accident, guided the moth's evolutionary progress. Many creationists grudgingly admit that evolution by natural selection, or quote unquote survival of the fittest, is clearly evident in the reproduction of bacteria, or farm insects, or peppered moths. But creationists rarely concede that evolution by natural selection also applies to human beings. Again, we are asked, how could evolution account for the human eye? To explain such complexity in nature, Charles Darwin observed that virtually all species exhibit a strong tendency toward overpopulation. Competition is therefore extremely intense within the species for limited nutrients and for other scarce essentials of life. Any members of the species that possess even the slightest advantage in competing for these essentials will likely survive to produce offspring which inherit this tiny advantage. Any awareness of the environment provides a tremendous competitive advantage. In light, for example, if light, for example, could be sensed by skin cells, a life form could 1, orient itself vertically, 2, be aware when a possible source of nutrition eclipsed the light source, and 3, be aware when predators cast a shadow. A life form without eyes produces offspring without eyes. But suppose that a few of the offspring possess a small number of light-sensitive skin cells. These offspring would enjoy a competitive advantage and would perpetuate this characteristic throughout the species. Suppose now that a few offspring begin concentrating these light-sensitive cells into a single location, thus amplifying their sensitivity. Again, this competitive edge would quickly spread throughout the species. Offspring that did not display this characteristic would die without contributing to the gene pool. Now, let us suppose that a tiny percentage of offspring are produced with a slightly concave shape to their light-sensitive regions. This rounder shape would allow the life form to better discern the direction from which light was emanating, again, providing a reproductive advantage. Now, finally, let's recall that cells are filled with semi-transparent liquids. So it wouldn't be too surprising if this liquid occasionally found itself within the concave surface of the light-sensitive region. This liquid would thus serve as a very primitive lens, helping to focus light. In this manner, step by step, millennia after millennia, natural selection accumulates beneficial adaptations while discarding the remainder. What is impossible in 100 years may be inevitable in 1 billion, said Carl Sagan. The human eye required almost 4 billion years to evolve. Regarding the evolution of bodily organs and appendages, creationists often ask, well, what good is half an eye? Or what good is half a wing? In other words, until such body parts are fully functional, they produce no survival advantages. Natural selection, therefore, would not perpetuate an eye or wing that was under construction or on the verge of working. Creationists believe, thus, that conscious end-result planning and design were necessary to produce functional organs and appendages. Nature, however, flatly contradicts the creationists' all-or-nothing argument. For within nature, we find eyes in all stages of development. We find life forms with no eyes at all. Eyes that sense only the presence or absence of light. Eyes that focus light extremely poorly, such as the moles. Eyes that cannot see more than a few feet. Eyes that cannot see color, such as most dog breeds. Eyes that are human-like, and eyes that are far superior to human eyes, such as the bald eagles. Within nature, we find a smooth and unbroken continuum of visual capabilities among the various animal species. What good is 50% of an eye? Well, it enjoys a decided advantage over 49% or 37% or 8% in the struggle for survival. The creationist argument that partially developed anatomical structures produce no survival advantage, ignores the real world diversity of nature. Moreover, the terms fully developed and partially developed are relative. Bald eagles may pity human beings for their partially developed eyesight and wonder how natural selection perpetuated such unfinished organs. Likewise, we find winged animals ranging from the falcon, a superb flyer, to the pigeon, an average flyer, to the chicken, a poor flyer, to the flying squirrel, a downhill only glider, to the ostrich and penguin, which cannot fly at all. Natural selection evolves traits and bodily structures to fit the species' own particular environment. Virtually all animal species continue to be under construction because environmental pressures continue to be exerted. But what if genetic variation or mutation does not produce the beneficial adaptations upon which natural selection may act? In such a case, the species would show no evolutionary progress and would likely become extinct. Extinction is as much a part of evolution as natural selection. Looking back over Earth's geological history, over 99% of all animal species have failed to adapt successfully to their environments and have therefore fallen victim to extinction. Let me say that again, because I don't think you heard that correctly. Over 99% of all life that has ever existed has damn near gone extinct. So all the life that you have seen anywhere on Earth is only about 1% of all the life that has ever existed on Earth. 1%. Just saying. If creationists want to believe that all life forms were carefully and purposefully designed by a creator, then they must accept the creator's abysmal 99% failure rate. Any watchmaker whose products similarly failed would be dismissed as incompetent. Because we humans currently live outside the environment in which we evolved, we sometimes feel psychologically disinclined to accept evolutionary theory. The circumstances under which human beings emerged and developed bore no resemblance to today's modern industrial society. Today, the struggle for survival usually means paying the mortgage on time or saving enough money to send your children to college. Most of us, fortunately, have no firsthand experience in true life or death survival. And it is precisely because of our total estrangement from survival of the fittest that psychologically and emotionally, we are highly skeptical whether human beings evolved at all. Moreover, because of technological advances that overcome human genetic imperfections, human evolution is now moving backward rather than forward. My own eyesight, for example, is extremely poor, requiring a negative 5.75 correction in each eye. If I had been born 1,000,000 years ago, I would never have survived to father children. Today, I simply wear contact lenses or glasses and enjoy no less opportunity to reproduce than a person with naturally perfect vision. My daughter, however, may inherit my poor vision, and so may her children. A technologically advanced society, therefore, may largely neutralize the progress of natural selection, thereby creating the illusion that natural selection was never operative in the evolution of the species. Thus far, we have cited a few instances of evolution in action. I hope that these examples have illustrated both the simplicity and the elegance of Darwin's theory of natural selection. But suppose that you're the kind of person who isn't impressed much by theories or philosophical discussion. I mean, after all, the history of science is replete with grand theories that turned out to be nonsense. Suppose you're the kind of person who, before accepting a scientific claim, requires direct, clear, visible evidence. Fortunately, evolution quite literally gave us rock-solid evidence to attest its progress. From single-celled organisms all the way to human beings, this rock-solid evidence is known. Hold up. All right, let's back up a little bit. Fortunately, evolution quite literally gave us rock solid evidence to attest its progress, from single celled organisms all the way to human beings. This rock solid evidence is known as the geologic column. The geologic column refers to our planet's accumulated layers of sedimentary rock. The geologic column amassed its layers from bottom to top, just as water collects on a pail from bottom to top. The oldest layers of the geologic column, therefore, lie at the bottom, whereas the newest layers are uppermost. A freshly painted lawn chair provides a good analogy to the geologic column. If you observe wet orange paint covering the entire surface of a lawn chair, you may be confident that the orange layer was also the most recent layer of paint applied. If you scrape off the outer layer of orange, you may discover a weather-worn layer of green painted underneath. You may safely conclude that the green layer is older than the orange layer. Likewise, a red layer found under the green would indicate that the red paint was applied first, followed by green, and finally orange. New layers of paint may be applied over old layers, but never under old layers. Similarly, sedimentary rocks that compose the geologic column are layered on top of each other. This stacking of sediments, layer upon layer, means that the oldest rocks are lowest on the column, while the newest rocks are uppermost. Here's a look of it. Here's what it looked like. That's what the geologic column looked like. I know everything's backwards, but you get the fucking point. Don't be dense. Okay. Simple logic, and I know that's difficult for Christians, but simple logic concludes any other conclusion. Wait, what? Precludes. Okay. Simple logic precludes any other conclusion. In order for the lower-lying rock layers to be younger than the higher rock layers, nature would have to somehow lift up an entire mountain, remove the lowest underlying layer of ancient rock, replace the ancient rock with modern rock, and place the ancient rock on top of the modern rock, and 5, set the mountain back down on top of the newly arranged stack. Such a scenario is beyond absurd. More realistically, erosion may weather away the geologic column's top layer of rock, which may later be replaced by new sedimentary deposits. The result is that the contiguous layers of the columns do not always represent uninterrupted time periods, but the point to remember is that the column always amasses from bottom to top, from oldest to newest. Radiometric dating techniques also confirm the chronological order of the geologic column. Radioactive elements such as uranium, potassium, and rubidium decay at precise and constant rates. Potassium decays to argon, and rubidium decays to strontium, I guess is how you say it. By measuring the ratio of parent to daughter isotopes, geologists can establish the age of rocks containing these radioactive elements. Without being told where a particular rock was discovered within the geologic column, a scientist may independently ascertain the answer using radiometric dating. The chronology of the column may therefore be established by both logical and radiometric methods, both of which confirm and reinforce each other. Why is the geologic column important to evolutionary theory? Because the oldest fossil-bearing layers of rock, 3.5 billion years old, contain fossils only of simple one-cell organisms which lived in the oceans. Layers slightly higher on the column hold the remains of tiny multicellular organisms. Moving upward, these multicellular life forms evolve into soft-bodied creatures such as corals, sponges, and worms. Continuing our ascent, we first encounter primitive fish in layers dating back 600 million years. A few species of fish then evolved into amphibians, capable of surviving both in water and on land. Amphibians first appear in the geologic column in layers 405 million years old. Climbing higher, we discover that amphibious creatures evolved into reptiles approximately 310 million years ago. Reptiles, as all children know, grew in size and became the mighty dinosaurs. The first dinosaurs appear in rock layers dating back 225 million years. Small mammals also appear in these layers. Dinosaurs suddenly disappear from the column in layers younger than 65 million years. The small mammals, however, continue to develop both in size and complexity. A very primitive form of ape first appears in rock layers dating 40 million years. Ape evolution progresses to Australopithecus, still higher on the column. Australopithecus was our species' direct ancestor. We're now approaching the uppermost sedimentary layers of the geologic column. Australopithecus is followed first by Homo habilis, then by Homo erectus, and finally, at the very top of the column and only at the top, Homo erectus evolves into Homo sapiens, our own species. The oldest known fossils of Homo sapiens are found in rock layers only 275,000 years old. Leaving aside for a moment the findings of radiometric dating, the geologic column establishes the chronological order in which various life forms first appeared on Earth: single-celled organisms, multi-celled, soft-bodied, fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, apes, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. Creationists' most sacred doctrine is that God created all life forms, including man, during a single brief period known as Creation Week. Dinosaurs and human beings walked the earth simultaneously, as did gorillas and trilobites. All animal kinds are the same age, give or take a few days. If this biblical doctrine were true, then all kinds of animal fossils would appear simultaneously, side by side, in the same layers of the geologic column. Rather than a gradual progression from simple to complex life forms, the column would reveal an instantaneous appearance of all animal kinds. But the scientific facts simply do not support the creationist position. Creationism is therefore unscientific at its core and should be viewed appropriately as just religious dogma. Answering creationist objections to evolution. Creationists staunchly defend their beliefs as science-based rather than solely Bible-based. Christian fundamentalists work feverishly to persuade local school boards to include creationism as part of the science curriculum. Let's examine creationists' objections to evolutionary science. In doing so, let's continually ask ourselves one question. Is the objection to evolution based upon issues of science or passages of scripture? Creation argument number 1. The geologic column reveals the Cambrian explosion, a sudden appearance of many diverse life forms. The answer. Apparently, creationists want to believe that the Cambrian explosion actually represents Creation Week, as depicted in Genesis. Such an interpretation of Earth's geology is flawed for the following reasons. Number 1, Cambrian rock layers do indeed reveal the sudden appearance of many life forms. However, when geologists and paleontologists use the word sudden in describing the Cambrian explosion, they're referring to a time span of tens of millions of years, which on the geologic scale is a very brief period. Creationists read the word sudden in the scientific literature and misinterpret it to mean instantaneous. Number 2, the reason why Cambrian rock layers show a dramatic increase in fossil remains is that soft-bodied pre-Cambrian life forms did not easily fossilize. It was not until hard shells, bones, and teeth evolved that fossilization could readily occur. The Cambrian explosion actually represents the evolution of fossilizable body parts. Despite the difficulty and rarity of soft body fossilization, the geologic column nonetheless contains many pre-Cambrian fossils, which antedate the Cambrian explosion by billions of years. If the Cambrian explosion is supposed to represent Creation Week, how do we explain the previously existing life forms? Since the Christian God was preceded historically by the Greek gods, did they create the pre-existing life forms? Number 4. The Cambrian explosion occurred 570 million years ago, rather than 6,000 years ago, as creationism demands. Cambrian rock layers contain fossils of neither mammals nor reptiles. Again, this disproves the notion that all life forms appeared simultaneously. Another creationist argument. The many gaps found in the fossil record contradict evolutionary theory. Here's the answer. Here again, we encounter the now familiar God of the gaps. This time, he becomes God of the fossil gaps, whose existence is asserted to explain any absentee fossils within the geologic column. A few comments. Number 1, the theory of evolution does not predict the fossilization of any species. Fossilization occurs for wholly independent reasons of geochemistry, not because of evolutionary theory. So fossil gaps in no way contradict evolutionary science. The geologic column is a fortunate coincidence of nature that attests biological evolution. Number 2, even under ideal circumstances, fossilization is an extraordinarily rare occurrence. Until the early 1900s, for example, tens of millions of passenger pigeons flew throughout North America. Their past existence is documented both by photographic evidence and by millions of eyewitnesses. Yet, to date, scientists have discovered no fossilized passenger pigeons. We shouldn't be surprised, therefore, if many other species likewise left no fossilized remains. Number 3, gaps found within the fossil record do not relate to the direct evolution of Homo sapiens. Because our species is found only at the top of the geologic column, and because scientists devote more effort to finding our own ancestors than those of other species, The fossil record of recent human ancestry is rich and incontrovertible. The difficulty of chronicling the evolution of Homo sapiens is not fossil gaps, but fossils so closely related that it is difficult to classify whether one ancestral species ends and another begins. Number 4. When scientists present intermediate fossils documenting the transition of one species into another, creationists are never satisfied. For example, if fossil number 1 is argued by scientists to be a close ancestor of fossil number 2, creationists invariably claim that a gap exists. What we need, creationists say, is an intermediate specimen. Let's call it fossil 1.5. If scientists possess or later discover fossil 1.5, creationists then lament that 2 gaps now exist. One gap between fossils 1 and 1.5, and another gap between fossils 1.5 and 2. As paleontologists unearth each new intermediate life form, creationists find 2 newly created gaps to be filled. Number 5. I've received many letters from Christian fundamentalists who refer to a so-called missing link. Most of these letters allege that this missing link is a fossil gap separating human beings and modern apes. I am told that since the missing link is missing, there is no evidence that humans evolved from apes. A missing link will always exist between humans and modern apes because they're not our ancestors, dumbasses, having evolved on a separate branch of the primate tree. Scientists are currently searching for a distant ancestor common to both humans and modern apes, and this research seems to be the source of much confusion among creationists and the general public. But there's no missing link raising doubts about the evolution of Homo sapiens from Homo erectus. Creationist argument number 3, I don't fucking know which one we're at. Scientists have proposed contradictory theories of evolution. Since both sides of a contradiction cannot be true, evolutionary theory must be partially or completely wrong. And here's the answer. Creationists love to point out that various scientists espouse different theories on how biological evolution has progressed throughout geologic history. Charles Darwin initially proposed that species evolve gradually to fit their environments. This position is known as gradualism. More recently, some scientists, led by Harvard's Stephen Jay Gould, have posited that evolution sometimes progresses in fits and starts. Long periods of little or no evolution are interrupted by quick evolutionary bursts. This theory is called punctuated equilibrium. A few thoughts as to whether these diverse theories lend credence to creationism. Number 1, here again, creationists are failing to clearly differentiate the theories of evolution from the facts of evolution. By analogy, when Einstein published his theory of general relativity, why am I bumbling this? Anyway, by analogy, when Einstein published his theory of general relativity in 1915, it conflicted slightly with the established gravitational theory previously set forth by Isaac Newton. Would creationists propose that conflicting theories of gravitation mean that gravity is a myth? The current debate is how, not whether, evolution occurred. Stephen Jay Gould, by the way, was one of the leading scientists who fought to keep creationism out of the public schools. Number 2, gradualism and punctuated equilibrium are complementary rather than contradictory. The geologic column reveals that some species evolved in a steady but gradual manner, whereas others evolved more rapidly and erratically. The speed of evolution is closely tied to external pressure exerted by the environment. I was about to say by the government. I'm stupid. During periods of swift ecological change, species either evolve rapidly or become extinct. By contrast, sharks, which thrive in a stable ocean environment, have shown almost no evolutionary change in millions of years. When scientists openly discuss and debate gradualism versus punctuated equilibrium, all members of the scientific community view such discourse as beneficial, challenging, invigorating, and as a great strength of the scientific method. Creationists, however, view scientific debate and disagreement as signs of weakness. Creationism, therefore, ridicules open-mindedness and scoffs at the free exchange of ideas, so essential to a democratic society and to the scientific method itself. To question one's own opinion is sinful for the creationist, who is not permitted the luxury of healthy skepticism. All contrary opinion is instantly dismissed as foolishness because the Lord thy God has spoken. Creationists have demonstrated themselves to be not scientists, but literary critics. They carefully scan the scientific literature for any hint of disagreement among paleontologists studying human origins. When they inevitably find a diversity of opinion on various aspects of human origins, creationists leap to the non sequitur that such diversity substantiates creationism. I know of very few instances in which a team of creationists actually sponsored or participated themselves in an archaeological dig. They are too busy writing literary reviews. Here's another creationist argument. Even if one believes that all life evolved from a single cell or cells, a creator is still necessary to explain the origin and complexity of cellular life. The answer. Earlier, we discussed how creationists point to highly evolved organs, such as the human eye, and claim that the organ's complexity reveals supernatural design. The fallacy of this argument is to assume that blind chance or random accident guides evolutionary progress. Moreover, the argument falsely demands a lottery-like instant winner rather than a gradual accumulation of adaptations through natural selection. Never tiring of repeating the same mistakes, creationists trot out their random accident straw man to preach the unlikelihood of cell evolution. Creationists detail the complex structure and inner workings of a single cell with its DNA, RNA, and various organelles that perform so efficiently their complicated tasks. Then creationists pose a question. Since the single cell, or a group of cells, could not benefit from the accumulated advantages of previous natural selection, how could such intricate structures originate without God's intervention? The answer is that ancient cellular life did not contain the complex nucleic acids and organelles found within modern cells. As with the human eye, creationists cite a modern example, the result of 4 billion years of cellular evolution, then ask, how could such an elaborate structure randomly pop into existence? The answer is that it couldn't, and no scientists claim that it could. The first cells contained no nucleus at all and were bare structures consisting mainly of an exterior membrane. Biological membranes form easily and spontaneously from a mixture of water and simple lipids. Hundreds of books have detailed at length the now legendary Miller-Urey experiment performed at the University of Chicago in 1953. As a brief summary, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey found that amino acids, the building blocks of cell proteins, form readily from a mixture of ammonia, methane, water, and hydrogen gas, all of which were present in abundance on the primordial Earth. In other words, Miller and Urey discovered that the molecules of life naturally assemble themselves from a few basic, easily available ingredients. The origin of life required only organic molecules, water, and most importantly, millions of years to develop. Moreover, in the late 1990s, scientists discovered that life can occur and thrive in conditions previously thought to be completely inhospitable to biological systems, such as in near boiling hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor or in poisoned methane ice. I'll pause right there for the moment. My motherfucking neck hurt from sitting like this and shit. So I'm gonna go back to the motherfucking living room. But let me pause. Let me right where I, and then I'll talk to y'all more directly. But here's where we paused at. Another creationist argument. This the book. Atheist Universe by David Mills. It is not a very big book, as you can tell. So, and we are already, about halfway through? So, oh, fucking hell, dude. My motherfucking back, my neck, and my back. All my shit busted, son. I was gonna roll a blunt, but fuck it, I already got a bowl packed. Yeah, it's a good book. You know what I mean? It's one of my top 3 books. Atheist Universe by David Mills, and the others are 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God by Jonathan M.S. Pierce, and 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in Gods or Believing in a God. And that one's by Guy P. Harrison. Also got another book, but it's really hard to read because the language is so old, but it's Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by McKay? Author. I don't fucking remember his name, but you can just Google it. It's called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. You don't want to come in. I'm not doing it. I mean, if you do Amelie? If you do, let me know. It's a really good book. It's one of the ones I recommend all the time. Like 30 reasons, 30 arguments against the existence of gods. That one I've already read 4 times. It is so fucking good. Like, this Atheist Universe, I think I've only read it 3 times. Twice for sure, but it may be 3 times. And 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God, I read that one 4 times. Like, that's just so good. They're so good. They've given me so much ammunition against these Christians and their dumbass non-arguments. That's assuming they can even spell this shit. Like, god damn, these motherfuckers and their spelling. Holy fuck. No, but all right, fine. But I swear to Bob, if you ask to come in again or to go back outside, as soon as I let you in. Hey, Petunia. Wow. All right. Well, you're reading this with your eyes closed. No, I wasn't. It's just the angle I was at. It looked like my eyes was closed. I'm about to go back over here so I can roll a blunt. Or no, so I can smoke a bowl since I already got it packed up. Come here. Oh, shit. I'm sorry, buddy. That's how I broke you last time, son. Bam. The fuck? Well, I hope y'all enjoyed the reading, but I'm probably about to respond to some more comments. You know what I'm saying? Straight up. So, thank you all for watching. I appreciate the comments. I'm gonna read them later. You know what I'm saying? But y'all, go read your Bibles. Yeah, that's what you can do in the meantime. Go read your Bibles. Oh shit. Excuse me. Why are you still fucking here? I said go read your goddamn Bible. All right, man, I'm out. Thanks for watching, you guys. Fuck. Holy shit, I'm not in this shit.